Welcome, viewers, to the series Exploring Careers in the Green Economy. This episode is entitled Regenerative Resource Management and Sustainable Consumption. My name is Xander Kessler, and I'm a member of the class of 2022.5 at Middlebury College. And I would like to introduce this episode's speaker. I'm joined today by Zachary Tofias from the class of 2000.5, who is the Director of Food and Waste Programs with the C40 Cities Climate Leadership Group. Welcome, and thank you for joining us, Zach.
Hi, thanks for having me.
For sure. So our first section is talking about a number of professional areas involved in the green economy. Could you tell us a little bit about C40 and how it fits into the green economy?
Sure. So I think differently than perhaps others that you're talking to, C40 is a network of the world's megacities committed to addressing climate change. So we support our cities in collaborating effectively, sharing knowledge, and driving meaningful, measurable, and sustainable action on climate change. We're a mayors-driven nonprofit organization that works with 97 cities around the world, representing around 700 million people and 25% of global GDP. And so we're really serving to help them accelerate the delivery of their climate actions. Mayor Eric Garcetti from Los Angeles is the chairman of C40, and Mayor Bloomberg is the president of the board. I'm sitting here in Boston, outside of Boston today, but our headquarters are in London and in New York City, and we have offices and staff around the world.
So in your works, what sort of other organizations does C40 engage with in order to go about measuring and delivering on these climate solutions?
So first and foremost, I work directly with cities. I work with senior city officials. So we work with mayors' offices, as we're a mayoral-driven organization. And then I work with the kind of senior city officials that are overseeing the waste and food systems activities in their city. The other organizations that we work with are range from the cities themselves to UN organizations, international organizations, to groups like ICLEI or UCLG that are other cities organizations. We work with research groups like the World Resources Institute, more focused firms, engineering firms like Arup Consulting Firm, or consulting firms more generally like McKinsey or Bain, or kind of all the folks that are also interviewing on perhaps another channel. But yeah, in general, my counterpart most directly are city officials. And we work with financial institutions, so development banks to unlock resources, and then technical organizations that some of whom I've already mentioned.
Mm-hmm. So you did mention that there are other sort of city-based organizations. Do you think there are other organizations out there that are doing something similar to what you guys are doing, or do you think you're pretty unique?
Well, we're definitely unique. I think that we're unique in the sense that we're a mega cities organization. That was 97 cities are our membership. Some of the other city organizations, and I should say there are lots of city organizations. In the US, there's the US Conference of Mayors. There are a lot of different organizations, but we're unifocused on climate change and mega cities so that we can help deliver solutions to the climate crisis by using the power and the scale of cities. Most everybody that's watching this probably has some familiarity with their mayor. You may not have as much familiarity with your senator or certainly your president. You might know who they are, but it's unlikely that you'd be able to contact them. Mayors are uniquely well positioned in that they're close to the people, but powerful enough to really make big change. And the fact that we're working with 97 cities means that we can bring about solutions that can scale and have a global impact. Working with Tokyo or New York City or Los Angeles means that when we can help them implement a solution that's effective to reduce the amount of consumption-based emissions, to make it easier for people to eat more plant-based options, to waste less food, that's a solution that we can then say, look at this model. Let's scale this up around the world so that cities around them and states and regions can follow suit. But it's also a solution that if Los Angeles has it, London will implement it. If London has it, then Johannesburg will implement it. So we've created a model that allows us to really scale solutions very quickly, lowering transaction costs so that good ideas can really flow freely and quickly.
Awesome. Do you think you could maybe give an example of what one of those solutions might look like? Maybe something that's
Yeah.
specifically connected to your role at C40?
Yeah. So right now, we are working with a number of cities to advance towards zero waste. This is a big challenge. We are a consumer society right now, but our world can't handle that. As the rest of the world gets wealthier, there's going to be an increase in consumption.
Mm-hmm.
However, those amongst us that are the most privileged need to take steps now to avoid the creation of waste. There's kind of a false solution that we can recycle our way out of this. But with limited resources, we're trying to come up with solutions that can reduce the amount of waste that's needed. So we're helping cities think about more circular economy solutions, how they can encourage and incentivize repair and reuse, whether it's in Tel Aviv, they're utilizing libraries to share toys and other materials, so tools that you don't need to buy yourself, but you could go and borrow. Um, in San Francisco, the city government is really pursuing a strategy in these times of COVID that address economic activity, that address equity, and that address ensuring health. And so all of that, from a waste perspective, they already are collecting food waste, but they're creating that food waste and creating compost that they're then selling to the wine industry. So it's this virtuous cycle of taking content to make a resource that is a renewable source, which is something that we're seeing great interest in helping think about how do we avoid the use of single-use items. So we've got these material bans that are coming out to make it easier for people to kind of live a better life that doesn't mean that it's a disposable life.
Awesome. Could you maybe talk about like how your role directly plays into that, and sort of what you might do on a day-to-day or week-to-week basis?
So as the director of our food and waste work at C40, I oversee a team of 6 people that are globally spread that manage the day-to-day relationships with the senior city officials that are in our networks. So what we do, my team runs a series of networks. We have a food systems network, we have a waste to resources network, we have a sustainable waste systems network that are working with these city officials to identify what their plans are and then help them implement. So facilitating connections between them. My role is to set the overall strategy and to fundraise, to identify resources. So I'm overseeing the team, I'm setting the direction of travel, I'm managing some of the relationships with some of our funders. So there's a lot of relationship management, there's a lot of developing presentations to convey the work that we're doing, to get people more excited about the work that we're doing, and working with mayors to create briefing notes so that mayors are really aware and are able to talk about the really impactful things. We've got some big events that are coming up this year, the UN Food Systems Summit, the COP26 Summit happening in Glasgow. And so I'm overseeing our roles involved in them from a sectoral basis to make sure that the city voice is being elevated up into these international conversations.
All right, could you tell us a little bit about what your favorite part is of this work?
So I've been at C40 for 13 and a half years. And my favorite part about the work that we're doing is I feel like I'm actually having a difference. I'm making change possible. And for me, that is one of the most important things in this global crisis that we're in right now, this global climate crisis. I'm helping to make a difference, to save the world. And I feel really good about that, I'm part of the change that we all know that we need to do. And I'm giving tools to cities to help them do.
Awesome. So what is, on the other hand, the most challenging part of your work?
That is difficult. These aren't easy challenges. And so that comes back to what do I enjoy about it? That we're coming up with solutions that don't exist. We're identifying the solutions, and in the work that I'm doing, I'm flowing those good ideas to others. We kind of do some matchmaking. We bring cities together that might have similar ideas or similar challenges so that we can come up with common solutions. And that's the role that I and my team are directly doing, so that we can actually say, because of us, these cities are doing things differently. and the world is going to be a better place because of it. And so I guess that to answer it more directly, the most frustrating, challenging thing is that this is tough. There's not enough resources. There's not enough attention played to it. But every day we're increasing the attention, and the fact that we're having this conversation means that there are many others out there. And I think Middlebury is a wonderful place that's been encouraging environmentalism. Bill McKibben is one of these amazing voices in this space. So there are so many inspirational voices at Middlebury that you might not be aware of, but that are doing and having such a big impact. And so the Middlebury voice is out there having an impact in all these different areas and all these different organizations. That is really, I think it counters the challenge of climate change is a really big problem that we all need to do more. A lot of us are doing a lot, but nobody's doing enough. So everybody needs to do more.
Great, thank you. So looking towards the future, what do you see as both the future of the organization, C40, and also the future of your own specific role?
I mean, I've loved my time at C40. I've been here for 13 years. I started with the Clinton Foundation as the city director of our work in Addis Ababa. And then I've taken on a number of different roles in different functions at C40. So my trajectory has been, I keep bumping into new challenges. I started with large scale real estate development. I then moved into urban planning, and now I'm looking at this consumption-based emissions challenge, which is kind of the new frontier. This is what we need to do more of. We don't know the answers yet, but we're working on them. And so for me, I see an opportunity to keep expanding this role, to keep expanding the impact that we're having, because we don't have all the solutions yet. We're just starting, and we need to do a lot more. Food emissions are around 30% of global emissions. Waste is one of the fastest growing climate pollutants. So we need to do a lot more. And cities as centers of consumption, 80% of food is going to be consumed in cities by 2050. 2050 is no longer somewhere that's, an abstract idea, but that's not too far away. And we need to do a lot so that we can have a planet that we'll recognize. So for me and for C40, I think that my career path is continuing to make really positive change. I don't know what my function's going to be, but it will be about delivering solutions and scaling them. And I think that C40, focusing on cities, which have been perhaps an underappreciated change agent to date, will continue to grow in prominence, depending on the audience. And so any national government officials that are listening, plug your ears for a second. But when nations talk, cities act. And we saw this a lot over the past number of years with the Paris Agreement, that where nations were kind of slow about what they were going to do, cities were taking action. And the real reason for that is, at the end of the day, if your garbage isn't collected, the mayor's not going to be reelected. So that's not a national issue, but it's a very local issue. And when people are starving, as this COVID crisis has unfortunately been really devastating on the economic activity, many of our cities are suffering from about 25% food insecurity. It's the cities that need to step up and deliver that, whether it's through school feeding programs or food aid and distribution. And that's the work that I feel really good about, that we're supporting cities do this more efficiently.
Great. All right. Now, next question is, could you talk about what aspects of your Middlebury experience in terms of either classes or general skills or, just extracurriculars you had on campus, how those things prepared you specifically for your work currently?
So I was a political science major at Middlebury, and I was an econ and history double minor. I took courses that I found interesting, and just at the end of the day, I was a poli-sci major and an econ and a history minor. All of those prepared me really well, because a lot of what my job is communicating complex ideas and synthesizing information, and communicating it to those that we're working with. So the skills that I picked up at Middlebury were about how we work together. I was in student government, and I think that all of those activities supported where I am. on a more personal level, it was because one of my college roommates knew somebody at the Clinton Foundation that I actually even found out about the Clinton Foundation as an opportunity. So the Middlebury Network was extraordinarily formative and enabling in my ending up in this line of work. And I like to pay it forward. So I'm always available to have peer networking opportunities.
Well, we really appreciate that. Thank you. So, you talked about you majored in political science, and did you always know that you wanted to do something involved in the green economy? Nowadays, I think people, who are graduating from Middlebury this year or next year, I think the green economy might have slightly different meaning to them than it did when you graduated. And, part of this series that we're doing is to sort of show how many different careers and paths there are into what we're calling the green economy. But when you were a student at Middlebury, was that something that you were thinking about in your future?
Back in the olden days when the dinosaurs were walking around campus, back in the late 90s when I was a student at Middlebury, this was an emerging area. I took a number of environmental economics classes. It was before Middlebury had really proven, before Middlebury had really developed the curricula that they do now. So it didn't feel like there were that many environmental jobs. I always knew that I wanted to do something that was a bit less traditional than investment banking or consulting. But those skill sets, I think, were skill sets that I personally was developing and brought to implement in the work that I'm doing now. So I think that it's the training that I got at Middlebury and then ultimately that I got when I got my MBA has positioned me to do this work that I'm doing now. And I think that the advice that I would give to students as they think about the green economy, I think that is my hope is that all of the economy will be green. Because what is the alternative to a green economy? Is it a black economy, a red economy? What is the opposite of that? That I think that it's a philosophy as compared to a niche. And I think that that's the direction of travel that we're seeing now, that we know that we can't keep an extractive take, make, waste type of economy anymore. That will not be sustainable. We're living well outside of the planetary boundaries as it is today. And so the future means we need to do a lot more differently. And so I think that my encouragement for anybody watching is the mindset that you bring, even if it is a non-traditional green economy, needs to be delivered in a green economy way, that it can't be a take, make, waste. It needs to be a circular, it needs to be something that is efficient. And none of those, you can put them in kind of green jargon, or you can talk about them in economic efficiency terms. But otherwise, you're going to have these stranded assets. There are not going to be the industries. So I'd encourage anybody is before they take the leap to think about what the long-term prospects are and what your function will be. Because I think that the real opportunities in all of this are how can we be more sustainable? And you can parse that however you'd like, but there's economic sustainability, there's environmental sustainability, but it can't be one or the other. It needs to be both.
Great. So you mentioned a little bit about your roommate sort of first introducing you. Could you tell a little bit more of your story of from campus to into your career, and then how that led to your work currently at C40?
So when I was at Middlebury, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I knew I wanted to do some good in the world, but like good Middlebury students, I ended up at a job at an investment firm in Boston. And I had a career offer, a job offer upon graduation. I was a Feb, so amazing opportunity to ski down, cap gown and skis to graduate. But there'd been a little bit of an economic hiccup and my job disappeared before I even started. So I ended up taking an around the world trip to figure out and think about what I actually wanted to do with my life upon graduating. And while I was traveling, I spent some time in Africa doing conservation research, was traveling with some Middlebury friends on 9/11. Or I wasn't traveling with them, but I was traveling. I was in Fiji on 9/11, and the world changed overnight. And so after I was able to get home, I took a job. I found a job in Boston doing medical investment at one of the major teaching hospitals in Boston. And that was an interesting job. I learned a lot. I learned about quality improvement in medicine, but it wasn't what I wanted to do for a career. So I went and got my MBA. And I went to Cornell University and got my MBA. And at Cornell, I focused on sustainable global enterprise. And that, again, means a lot of things, but it was thinking from a strategic perspective about how you use a business mindset to make a positive impact. Not necessarily for kind of maximizing profit, but making a profit while also making the world a better place. And upon graduating from Middlebury, from Cornell, I ended up in discussions with the Clinton Foundation, which was just launching its Clinton Climate Initiative. Now, the Clinton Foundation at that point was being guided by one of my Middlebury classmates, as it turned out. And they'd proven a real success in lowering the cost of antiretroviral HIV drugs. And so their next challenge that they wanted to address was climate change. And they'd used that networking model that President Clinton, responding to an ask from the mayor of London and the mayor of New York City, offered to support the delivery of that work. And so I ended up as our city director in Addis Ababa, Ethiopia. And my task was to help the city close down a landfill that was in the center of the city. And really, I was bringing a business mindset to this challenge of, we've got a huge dump in the middle of the city that had been on the outskirts and now is in the center of the city. They kept being pitched by perhaps well-intended, but mainly looking to make a quick buck, investors that were trying to sell carbon credits, CDM, Clean Development Mechanism credits. And so what I was trying to do is help them develop a more sustainable solution. And then, so I guess it's a meandering path that I've had at C40, but what I've been able to do is take my experiences along the way to figure out how to engage with city officials and really have a positive impact in the work that we're doing.
Thank you. So you mentioned that you went back and got your MBA. When you did that, did you know what type of work you were going to be doing with that, or do you think you were still sort of figuring it out at that point?
I mean, they always say you should go back and get an MBA when you know what you want to do, but it's also a good opportunity to make a pivot. So for me, and I think that there's a question about whether one needs an MBA or a graduate degree to do this kind of work. But for me, it was an opportunity to say, I've gotten my great liberal arts education, which has taught me to learn how to learn. I've really got that down. I had some interesting medical experience, but now I want to do something different. So the MBA kind of gives you that opportunity to pivot to do something else. And while I was at Cornell on my MBA, I focused on ecotourism. I was really interested in, again, how one could bring tourism dollars to make that positive impact locally, and spent some time in Croatia developing an eco resort and had a wonderful time there. But really felt like tourism wasn't necessarily where I wanted to go. I wanted to have a bigger impact on climate change. So simple answer is, have I had my career path mapped out? No, but every opportunity that I've taken advantage of has opened doors. And so I'm sure that I've missed opportunities in other places, but my philosophy has always been to take an opportunity with a great organization and be entrepreneurial about what opportunities you can make for yourself once you're into a great organization.
I think that's great advice. Thanks for sharing that. So that transitions well into our third segment, which is asking about your advice in general for students at Middlebury. So our first question is sort of what academic background do you think is most helpful for a role like yours?
So a role like mine, I think that you need a good strategic view. You need to be able to communicate well. You need to be able, and I mean that both in a literal and a figurative sense. And you need to be able to be an active listener, which I think are two sides of the same coin in terms of communication. I think that, so I've had the pleasure of hiring a lot of people, and I've hired people with a very wide set of backgrounds. But I think that one consistent trait that I like to see in folks is a willingness to learn and a willingness to jump in and get engaged. So much of the work that we do is different on a day-to-day. You could be writing a briefing note for former President Clinton one day, or writing a speech that the mayor of Milan is going to be giving to the UN the next day. And then the day after that, you could be needing to coordinate at a workshop, making sure that the 30 city delegates that you have flying in from around the world have the right hotels, and that the taxis or the bus that they're using to get around have been coordinated. So it's kind of you need the jack of all trades. So I really like the kind of background of folks that have a wide set of interests and have had a wide set of experiences. So I really think that a liberal arts education is a wonderful underpinning, because it allows you to think broadly, that this isn't widgets that we're making, that you do it in one way, but it's figuring out how do we come up with a creative solution to a challenge that has many different solutions that none have necessarily been proven. But it's kind of like, it's very much like the work that's being done in consulting projects, only we have a kind of more narrow sector and engagement that we're working on.
Awesome. Thank you. Do you have any sort of suggestion or idea of what type of experience you had, that like something you did over a summer, or before you got to C40, or like a first job that, you know, really sort of helped you learn the most, that, and sort of skills that you learned, not necessarily in the classroom at Middlebury, that you're still using?
I think that to your last question, the one other major thing that I think is especially important in a Middlebury context is languages. I'm embarrassed that I didn't take any languages at Middlebury, but I will say that every single person that I hire now probably speaks 3 languages at a professional level. That one of the more recent hires, I think, speaks 6 languages.
That's incredible.
Because the work that I'm doing is international. And while folks speak English at a business level, the ability to connect with people in their own languages is, I think, a wonderful skill. In terms of experiences that I had, I think all of them have led me to where I am now. And I think that my advice to anybody is that there is no one path to go on. Any path is the right path. And the ability to tell a good story about why you did what you did is the important component here. I think some great advice that somebody once told me was, always be learning. If you're not learning, it's time to move on. Because if you've learned enough and you're not pushed and it's not challenging and it's not interesting, then you should be doing something else. And so in all the experiences that I've sought out, I've tried to sop up as much information and knowledge as I could. So whether it's gaining experience and expertise from a mentor, or just observing, if they're not a formal mentor, observing somebody that you're working with that you really think is doing a great job. So finding those career opportunities, there is no such thing as the perfect internship or the perfect type of job opportunity. They all are, if there's a narrative that says, I did this, and then I did that, and then I did that. And there's a coherent story as to, why are you here now talking to me? Why are you interested in this job? And what has your experience provided you that will give you tools to do what we're doing better?
All right, so a final question I have is, what was your favorite class at Middlebury, if you have one?
Well, it's a wonderful question, and it's an extraordinarily difficult question, because they all were great. I mean, honestly, my Middlebury experience was a wonderful experience that I am envious that you are still enjoying, and I wish that I could go back, because college classes are wonderfully educational and exciting. But certainly there were some classes that stand out, and I think, you know, senior seminars that I took for my poli-sci classes were wonderful. I loved some of my J-term classes that were looking at nuclear espionage and media criticism, all of which kind of fit into I had a meandering path that has led me to where I am today, asking questions, thinking critically, and meeting a lot of great people, building a network that has served me well personally and professionally, and I know will continue to do so. And so I think that the real kind of biggest takeaway and my favorite experience from Middlebury was the Middlebury experience, that I don't think I could parse out one class over another, because Middlebury was not training me to be a widget puncher, but it trained me and gave me all the tools that I've needed to succeed in helping to develop a program looking at consumption-based emissions as we really work hard to create solutions that will provide a lasting and sustainable solution to the challenge of our climate crisis.
All right, Zach, thank you so much for your engagement with us and helping students to prepare for their first career destinations. Before we go, is there any final advice you have for mid students today?
Good luck, prepare. And I would say, in all seriousness, we didn't talk about kind of how to prepare for an interview or an informational, but I'd strongly encourage folks that are interested in this kind of work to reach out to me. But I'd also ask that they do some homework before. That green jobs is such a big, as we talked about a little bit, green jobs is such a big area. And I know that it can be challenging to think about, what do I want to do? When I was your age, I didn't have the answers either. But what I would really encourage is that as people invest time to talk to you, do the homework so that you can show up prepared to ask questions that are knowledgeable, so that you can really get something out of the conversation.
Awesome. Thank you so much. Well, everybody, this concludes this episode within the series Exploring Careers in the Green Economy. In closing, I'd like to encourage viewers to tune in to get career perspectives and advice from a number of professionals in a broad variety of organizations in our other episodes in this series. I also would encourage you to tune into the other MIDDVantage series, which can be accessed through the Events and Programs tab on the CCI website. Thank you again for watching, and thank you again, Zach, for joining us.
Thank you.